Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome here this morning. Lovely morning. I hope it is where you are, and hopefully we'll get a sense actually later on about where people are joining us from, because we're extending our reach with these events further and further. This time last week we had participants from London and from Paris, so hopefully we'll be extending our reach further. So my name is Claire Halpin. I am a visual artist, arts educator and curator, and for the purposes of this morning, I am the learning programmer with DLR Arts for this learning program, which is our spring learning program. So as part of the spring learning program, it was part of the winter learning program as well. We made a decision to try and embark on studio visits, and it is one of the programs that is really it's really taken off, and the numbers, as you can see by who's all in the room today, really taken off, just as quite a simple format, but it has really given us the benefits of, from the arts office point of view, of being able to get more people to events and people from further away, and as well as that, from the artist point of view, it has the benefit of all of these people being able to come to their studio, as we wouldn't all fit in Myra Jago's studio this morning. So there is a two-sided, so there is benefits to what we're all going through. So I just want to mention that we are recording this morning. So, and most people won't be on screen, so it's just kind of for the purposes of recording the studio visit with Myra Jago. So I would just like to welcome Myra Jago here this morning. We're joined from the Arts Office with Myra Davey and Camilla. So they're doing tech backup in the background. So just to explain, the format for this morning will be, Myra will give a presentation, an introduction to her practice, and then will show us different aspects of her studio. We have a little bit of an internet issue this morning, so Myra will be bringing her studio to the screen as opposed to us doing a quick spin around the studio. And then what we'll do is we'll take questions and answers afterwards, if that's okay with everyone. And we can do those questions and answers by, if you have something that's coming up, if you want to put it in the chat as we go through the session, or at the end, if you want to either physically put your hand up or put your virtual hand up, we'll try and keep an eye on to make sure that we get to all of the questions. And as well as that, if we don't see your hand, or just if you want to unmute yourself and give a shout out, we'll try and get to everyone. So we're hoping to take, as I said, take questions and answers towards the end. So without further ado, as I said, I'd just like to welcome Myra Jago. Thank you, Myra, for taking up the invitation to have us all around to your gaff this morning. So just to give a bit of background to Myra, personally, I first met Myra, I think that was the first time we met. We shared a studio in Talbot Studios, which Myra has told me is 2012, I think. So that was my first time to actually, I was aware of her work, but it was my first time to actually work alongside her, shall we say. So just to, Myra has graduated, she graduated from NCAD with BA in Fine Arts in 2009, and then went on to do an MFA in NCAD in 2011. Her work has been shown at the National Gallery, the RHA, the Hugh Lane Gallery, Central Bank of Ireland, Áras Éimeas Luaire, the Honourable Society of King's Inns Law Library, NUI Maynooth, the Royal Ulster Academy, the Ulster Hall, a billboard in East Belfast, and the Seamus Ennis Gallery. Her paintings are exhibited internationally in Chicago, New York, Brussels, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and the UK. Her work has been in many collections, is included in many collections, both in Ireland and abroad. Deloitte the OPW State Art Collection, the Central Bank Collection, the Green Age in Japan, Kildare County Collection, and many private collections nationally and internationally. She's been in receipt of many awards, including most recently through the Laoghaire-Rathdown, the County Council Professional Development Awards in 2012, 11, and in 2015. She has also exhibited at the Ashford Gallery in 2019, and also the National Gallery with a highly commended award in Portrait Prize at the National Gallery of Ireland in 2017. She has also done studio residency at the RHA and also received an Arts Council most recently, sorry, that's the most recently one, is the Arts Council Professional Development Award, and that was in 2021. So hopefully through this morning, we might be able to delve into some of those, maybe with the significance of those awards on your practice, Myra, but also maybe even kind of, you know, going back through some of the exhibitions you've been involved in. So Myra, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Hi everybody, and thanks so much for coming, and thanks for giving me a reason to put some makeup on, so brilliant. My studio is 4.5 meters by 3 meters. It's actually an up and over garage that was converted when we moved here 3 years ago, this month actually. So it's all fairly new, but it's great to have my own space. I've been in some really dodgy spaces, so it's really, really lovely to have this space to myself. And it's only like a few paces away from the house, but it's separate, so it's really, really nice. So I suppose the best thing is to just start with this screen share, okay? And just launch into, where we go from here. Okay, so I'm going to start with the magnets because they're sort of playful, and they were the very beginning of my work. This was in NCAD when I was getting ready for my degree show, and I was fascinated by, I'm fascinated, I think, more so by why we do the things we do, and why we, how we get distracted, how we get side turned, and you know, how, you know, things are out of our control, you know, decide more or less how we react to things. So the magnets, there's a magnetic core in the center of the earth that keeps us all firmly placed on the earth. But as Malevich said, we have this aspiration towards space. We have this aspiration and need to get away from the only place that supports us. So I started working with magnets and anything that would stick to them. And I tried out a few different ways. These were only tiny, like hand-sized, you know, clumps of metal. And eventually I went on the internet and I found Magnet Expert. And I got in touch with them, and they were really helpful. And I ended up using quite big, sort of hand-sized magnets to make this sculpture. And I called it Law, you know, because of the law of gravity. I really, really enjoyed making this. As you can see, it has coins, everything, anything that would stick to it, it has on it. There's one of my watches here, bottle opener, Christmas lights, old phone, the spoon, everything, cookie cutters, everything you could imagine. You can actually see the magnet there, you can see the size of it. And that's it's 2 iron hanging baskets wired together. And as you can see, it had to be held up. It was weighed a ton. The magnets were really, really heavy. And when they came delivered, they came in a metal box so that they would actually have been so powerful, they would have just attracted everything to them. So I was a bit scared of them, but I had to put a warning in front of it on the floor for people with heart monitors, or people who credit cards would have been wiped by the magnets. So that was sort of the beginning of the foray into my magnets. And I ended up buying loads of different ones after this. Oh, that was bought by the OPW, by the way. I have no idea where they have it now, or if it's just in storage. So I bought loads of these tiny, tiny little magnets, more or less just because I like them. So this is just a little thing I did. And I'll show you later on around the studio what I actually use the magnets for. But they are playful little things. Then after that, this is going on into my master show, and I was still thinking about the magnets, and I was gone into mirroring then and thinking about things being doubled and duality and all that. And so I used a triplicate book, which has like 2 layers of duplicate paper, to make images in positive and negative. You can see them better here. So it was this idea of otherworldliness, and they were actually held on the wall. So they were only just pages out of the triplicate book, and they were held on the wall with these tiny little magnets here. You can see them there. And all I had to do was put a staple in the wall, and then these would be held in place. And they held quite nicely. And then I made, this is, let's see. This here is, it's actually a painting, an oil painting of the book. So I was sort of quite enamored with the idea. I haven't really gone back to it since, but I think I will. And the idea of mirroring, it came from me. I get distracted, you know, when I'm walking out and all of a sudden you see a pond, and I'm mesmerized, and I don't know if it's the same for everybody else. It could just be me, but I'm totally mesmerized and besotted by the mirror image. And I think there's sort of a magical sense to it. So I think I'll go up into full screen. So just collecting all these images. This is Thomas Saraceno, who makes amazing sculptural work, and I really, really admire him. But he did a series called Cumulus, and I imagine that they're sort of put together digitally, but they're just a beautiful series of work. Going on then, I started to use a physical mirror. So this is actually a mirror card in a notebook. The type is in reverse, so that it only makes sense when it's seen in the mirror. This was D Appendix. I don't know, some of you might know Ciara McMahon is an artist, but she's also a medical doctor, and this is her practice in Blackrock. And she allowed me to stay for two months, just working away in all the rooms. The only room I couldn't go into was the consultation room. So I was able to set up these little scenarios. So it's the same thing again. It's the print is reversed, and then it only makes sense when it's caught in the mirror. And then I was invited to exhibit in the Tala Hospital, AMNCH, and it was the same idea again, this somewhere else. And you can see here, the type was reversed, and this is actually a mirror, sort of 90-degree angle to it. And it's the mirror that sort of makes the sense. I actually had a porter come up to me and point out that I'd written everything backwards. So that was a bit of fun. The little house you see here, that was actually in connection with Claire. Actually, Claire curated a show in Talbot Gallery, and it was fast-moving consumer goods. And you had to use stuff out of like the €2 shop at the time. So this is made of toothpicks and matchsticks and paint and card and glue, of course, all glued together. So it was a replica of, at the time, it was the time of a crash, and there was a whole estate, a Balmain estate out in the north side. I went out to it, and it was so eerie. There were beautiful, beautiful houses, but absolutely nobody in them. So I called this Nobody's Home, because it was like a house without a function. And they had all the connections where, you know, there was nothing connected outside. So that was first put into Claire's show, Fast Moving Consumer Goods, and then it travelled it was in Rua Red, and it was in Tala Hospital as well. It's in a box up the top now. This is my degree show, and at this point I had decided that trying to make sense of it all and how best to explain the duality of what I was trying to get across. So I thought, well, books normally progress in information and you sort of weave your way through it. But if the book just mirrored the same image, it would just sort of give that eeriness to the idea. This is another one. This is actually Dunleary. You can see the church spire there, and I think that's the hotel there, and the image is mirrored into a book. This one, this is Thomas who was it? Philip Pereno, The Boy from Mars. This was a huge show in IMA a good few years ago, and I really, really loved it. And I love this image in particular. So it was actually a mirror image, but I placed it in the book and mirrored it again and painted it. So this is oil paint again. And this one I called Emmy Noether. Emmy Noether, she formulated a theorem of symmetry, and so it sort of started to make sense to me. They've now realized that it's like an underlying principle of nature. It's used in architecture. It's a soothing thing. Symmetry is. It sort of calms you, and it's reassuring as well. So this is then. This was made during my residency in the D appendix, and it's the same house again on the Balmain estate, but just gone on and on and on. And it was called All This Has Happened Before and It'll Happen Again. And it was about the crash and about the sort of the revolving history we have, things going around and round and round. And it's as if we don't Belfast, in East Belfast, for Art in the East Side. So I was thrilled with that, and it was really brilliant to see your work up on a gigantic billboard. They should do it more often. They really should. Then it went back to the idea of trying to leave the earth, and I had a show in 8 Gallery, and it was called Learning to Fly. So again, I was using the mirror image, and this is called Perfect Weather to Fly. This is the Deloitte one. Deloitte bought this. And this one was called Safe House. Because at the time, homes were sort of at a premium and people were losing their home. So that's what I was going for. There's another one, house going down. I think that one went up to the RUA in the north. And a lot of these were sold abroad at a fair. I think it was Saul Gallery took a lot of my work abroad, and it did well. So this was called Courier. That's actually Doonbrishta in County Mayo, and Garden. And it was all about how would you live, and how, if you could fly, how would you fly? So these are the Learning to Fly people, and they're all doing they're all sort of functioning in their everyday, but they're doing it with the support because we can't actually fly. Then I got a residency in 2015 in the RHA, which was just amazing. And it was a turning point, because it was like as if, I don't know, there was no pressure. You could just work there, and you could just like experiment and see how things would go. And this was a little mathematical box, and I put an image in it, and because it had a reflective surface, it reflected it. And I called it the box of reassurance. And it wasn't to do with the scene or anything like that. It was just, if you were in a stressful situation and you needed some calm, you could just take this out of your pocket, and you'd be reassured instantly with the reflective nature of it. So then I just decided, let's see how things go if I just use any object. Will it work? Will it work with anything, you know? So I use buttons, and this is called Drawn Inward, and I've sort of messed around with the wording, you know, but it's not an exact mirror image, but just said you just get drawn into that centered point, and this is called I can't remember what it was called, but it's to do with what you find in the reward drawer, which is a palindrome. That's what it is. So it's to do with what you'd find in that drawer in your kitchen where everybody throws all the paraphernalia. I just took everything shiny out of the drawer and just put it in. And these are tiny glass beads, and I call this universe.
Sorry, Myra, could I just ask,
Yeah.
just to give an idea, maybe the scale of the paintings?
Oh yeah. These are all 30 by 40. All these ones, these small ones. This one was a little bit bigger. I think these were quite small. These were 20 by 25. So these were panels. They weren't on canvas. They were on panels, and they were about this size. So not too big. This was big. This was 100 by 120, and this was 60 by 80. So, and this was 100 by 120, so quite big as well. Centimeters, all centimeters. So these are these would have been 30 by 40, and this was a series I did for I got a show out in the Knoll in the Seamus Ennis Centre, and it's a really gorgeous gallery out there, and it's like a home. They have like home furniture and fireplaces, and you know, it's just lovely place to show. So it's the same theme again, and I decided to start working with fabric. So this is actually, you can't really make it out, but what it is it's a car crashed into a tree. So it would have been, I would have printed it twice and sewn it together, because you can see the red thread there. And I called it Crash Repair. And this was this is a throwback to the day we finished our college completely. And although like we were mature students, it was still a momentous day for us. So we're all sort of hanging around outside when we'd been kicked out of the place, literally. And this was called Boulder. This was a big one. This is 120 by 100 centimeters. And this line here is actually the mirror line. So what I began to realize was what you see from above, when it's mirrored, you actually don't see the same thing. You see what's underneath. So you're seeing a different view, a different perspective of the subject. This is called subliminal, and it was more or less the idea. It's the idea that we're not working on sort of the conscious level. This is all happening subliminally. And Blue Lagoon, and you can see the way that was. This was actually a fairground that was on the pier in Dunleary, so you can sort of see the big wheel there. It's only barely visible in it. Yeah, it was this idea. Oh yeah, then I went on to I was given the show in the Ashford, and it was for 2019, but I was actually told about it in 2017, so I had 2 years to worry. So I started to think about what was happening around us at the time, and although an awful lot more has happened since, at the time we were sort of getting it like psychologically, we were getting it from all angles. There was the ecology of, you know, problems, there was money problems, there was poverty, there were an awful lot of different things. We just seem to be bombarded with an awful lot of problems, and I was thinking we're sort of like an island and we're being bombarded. So even though it was 2017, it was 2 years to go, I was a bit worried that things would change and it wouldn't be a problem anymore, but it actually got worse. So there was an awful lot about borders and, you know, ownership of land, and you can't come in here, this sort of thing. So it was actually my daughter told me about this, Aoife, about the Pangea, and that at one point all the land mass in the world was all just one. and then it just started to slowly slip apart. So I thought that was very interesting, sort of a time before when there were no borders. So this is one of the pieces that I made. This is 40 by 40 centimeters, and this was for my show in the Ashford in the RHA. So I made 8 of these, and each one has a different issue. And the idea behind them was if we can just park the issue somewhere, we might be able to sort of get a grip and, you know, sort of deal with these things. We're being constantly bombarded. So this is, it's actually the Pangea. What I did was this image, I would have printed it onto silk twice, sewn it together, and then set it on a reflective surface and photographed it and then painted from that. That's the way I've been working now for the past while. Here's another one. This one, it's a little, just to show you. It's the same Pangea, it's just in a different colorway, and I can do that digitally. Once I have the image, I can actually change it, the colorways on it. So that would have been dealing with lamb borders and, you know, especially America, the United States and Mexico, and the wall as it was. This is a lovely image. This is actually from a COS ad that came in an email, and I just love the image so much. And I was thinking about us, isolation and people feeling isolated and people feeling disconnected. And what came to mind when I saw this image was the John Donne poem, No Man is an Island. And in it he says that we're all pieces of the continent, and that every one of us would be missed. That we're like a big community and we shouldn't think that we're alone and isolated. So the guy is here in the folds, but it's sort of become something else. And my initial ideas that were going into it, they sort of take second place then to what it becomes, I feel anyway. And this is the same piece of fabric, and this was made for the Hamilton, for the Eva Gore Booth celebration. And it's the same thing, it's the person is reflected in it. And this was for a piece of text she wrote where she wished for a time when there were no manly or womanly connections, that everybody was just a person and that gender didn't come into it. This is an image I had in a notebook from, believe it or not, my portfolio before I went into college. And I just loved it. It reminded me of barbed wire. And this is the barbed wire here. And at the time, Carol Cadwallader had just come out and The Great Hack was out. And she said in one line in it, she said, nobody knows what is what anymore. It was, you know, when we were being fed lies and we didn't know what was truth anymore. So I just, this is the ballet dancer here. And that was one of the pieces in the RHA. And this is the Earth. This is our home from the space station. I found it on the internet, on NASA, I think I found it. And it's actually, they just flattened out the image, but it's actually the actual Earth from the space station. So that got printed on silk as well. And this is it here. And it was funny because I use lighting, and the lighting is, sometimes I have to just pretend it's not there because the actual light is so close onto the silk that it's in the picture, but the light was just here. And I just thought it's like the sun sort of shining down on the earth. So this next one, this is the joyous day when she says we made history, when we had the repeal result in Dublin Castle. And I just love this image so much. What I ended up doing was just using the arms. So it's this piece, And I called it mountain because it looks a bit like a mountain, but the hands are sort of reflected over and over again, sort of they get softer and softer as the image goes away. And it was just that we still have a mountain to climb for equality. This one was called Stone Rose. This is the very end. Don't know if you can see, it's just a little bit of silk, and it was literally crumpled up, and I hung it. I suspended this one because just happened to get a house shadow at the back of it, and there were a lot of homeless issues at the time, and people without homes, and people living in temporary accommodation. So I just called it Stone Rose. Now, next I have, this is a little film about how I do my surfaces. So this would have been for the big piece behind me, very big canvases. And I worked the acrylic ground in between the weave of the canvas. Just keep working it in and in. And eventually it starts to dry and the water out of it evaporates and you begin to get a smooth surface. So this one, this is the end when it's it sort of flops and folds over the end. And I used to be sort of killing myself trying to clean it and scrape it off, and I just decided just to leave it and let it be as it is, because it's quite nice, it's quite soft. And then when you hang them up, they get sort of jagged on the bottom as well to dry. So this is what they end up looking at, like at the sides. This was for the Ashford show, that's how they looked. Here I've used the ballet dancer again. This is the very big piece behind me here. It's called Transition. And I used the ballet dancer throughout. These are some of the motifs I used on it. This is Brayhead. Sort of the car park is behind. And we'd only just moved out, and I was going for a walk one morning and I saw this graffiti and I just took a photograph of it. I thought it was lovely. 2 days later it was painted out over, so I was glad I got it. So I digitally cleaned it up, and then it got put onto this piece of fabric. This silk had to be printed in London because it was just too big. All I could do, I was printing on my own on my own little printer, you know, like A4 paper. So I did put this digitally together, and it's got the motifs from all the smaller paintings, and called it Transition. And this is the piece complete. It's a triptych, and in total it's 300 by 120. And I used the fabric again, and this was in this year's RHA annual eventually, after many months of waiting. And I used it again in this one, just rearranging the fabric. And this is another one. I haven't painted this one yet, but I think I will. So that's more or less all of the RHA. So then this past pandemic, everybody's been sort of a bit all over the place. Well, I know I certainly have been. So I was feeling a bit useless and feeling a bit sort of redundant, and I had work I could be doing, but it was like, what's the point, you know? So I decided to do something positive. So I made these 10, the sort of snippets of some of my favorite paintings. So they're literally just that size. They're just little details, and they were only 20 by 25. And I put them up on Instagram, and I sold them for a very reasonable rate. So it meant whoever was getting them wasn't being fleeced, and I felt really good that people were buying my work. So it was the ego, really, more or less. That was it. So yeah, so that sort of really brightened me up. I did it just before Christmas, so people had gifts for Christmas for people. So, you know, it worked out really well. This one, this was one I did in it was with this show in the RHA, and this one I called it Fire eventually, but it was about protest, because at the time there was just protest after protest after protest, and this is before Black Lives and, you know, all that, Black Lives Matter and all that. So like it was as if everybody was just fed up with the way things were. So this is it actually printed on the silk, and as you can see, it's much finer. I actually lose a lot of the ink. The way I do it is I stick silk to the A4 paper, tell the printer it's another thing, because the printer wouldn't accept it for ages. So you just run it through, print your image, and then you can peel the silk back off. The silk, it wouldn't last if it was wet or anything like that. You have to be very careful with it, but that's the way that worked. So there were a couple of different designs I tried, and I realized you have to have an awful lot of white on it, a lot to reflect a nice. If there's too much darkness, it doesn't really work. So that's the end of the image, and I called it Fire because it looked like fire and protest are, you know, sort of synonymous with each other. So that's this for the moment. I'm going to come back to it in a few minutes, if that's okay. And I'm just going to see, can I just show you how I arrange the fabric. So I'll stop share, is that right? Okay. So I can just go to here and down like this. So if this is the fabric here, that's the one. I have a reflective surface here, and I would literally just arrange it any way I can. And as you can see, we have the reflective surface, and I'll change the light, and sometimes the light will actually be right on top of it, and then I'll photograph it and rearrange it again, and photograph it and rearrange it again, and then afterwards I'll just look through all the images until I find one that, you know, I think will work, and they usually get cropped right down as well. Now, what else can I show you? Artists that I love. This is Ilya Kabakov, and he works with his wife Emilia Kabakov, and this is the sort of thing he works on. This is called the Center of Cosmic Energy, and it's a whole installation he did in Tufts University in the States. And what he does is he completely makes up complete scenarios. So this is an excavation dig where they found a way to access the noosphere, which is the mythical place. I did read it, all of this. Vernadsky is this place, you know, the way people are constantly accumulating information, and like, God love our future children's children, because they'll have so much more to learn than we do, because there's been more information has been more accumulated. So he reckons that it's all being stored in one of the spheres above the earth, and that we just need to access it and it'll all be there. So this is uncannily like the conference centre in Dublin, I think, personally. He also did, so he does these things, they're called Gesamtkunstverst, which means it's an entire artwork, and every media is used. So this is called The Man Who Flew into Earth from his apartment, and he has plaster on the floor, there's a hole in the ceiling, there's a catapult here where he's catapulted himself, and this whole work is after, and there's even interviews with neighbors who thought he was a really nice guy. You know, all this, just the way, I love the way he works, that he sort of comes at it from every single angle. I can see, what else am I showing? This is the, piece of silk I had printed. So it's quite big. Did a lovely job of it. Come back to my magnets. So I'm working on this painting at the moment, and if I'm working on the feet or a different part of it, what I do is I use the magnet to place it on so I can work as closely as I can with it. What else do I use magnets for? This is a little piece I'm working on at the moment. As you can see, it's just held in place by the magnet, and it means that you can just move it around as you need to work on it. And I'd need another magnet there as well if I'm not in the center, but it's easy. This is for Plid, which is Claire's new baby at the moment, and she's going to tell you about it at the end. Is that right?
That makes me sound like I had a new baby called Plid, Myra. I'll explain that further. I'll come back to that at the end. Thanks, Myra. Okay. Keep going.
Okay, what else can I show you? The brushes I use. Now, I'm all about the smooth, right? I really, really love things to be smooth. So I use these brushes, and they're really soft and they're really sharp. I use, when they start to get fuzzy, I use them to blend so they don't go to waste. And it's this little pack here from Evans. They're really, really cheap and they're brilliant. I don't like the rough brushes. These are the ones I use, and these are the ones I smooth out everything as I paint. At the end of a painting day, I'll just actually flick over the whole surface with these, because I don't want to leave anything raised. I want it to look as dreamlike as possible. And then I have these Pro Arte. They're tiny, tiny for, you know, for detail. So where else can I go? This. Again, when I'm painting, I have magnets all over the place. So I just literally hold the image I'm working on with the magnets, and it just makes life easier. You don't have sticky tape all over the place. It's much cleaner. I think that's about all. I have one of my favorite books. It's this book. My son Sean bought it for me, and it's Michael Borman's, who I love as well. I love lots of different artists, and it wouldn't be that I'd copy them. I just admire what they do. I admire how they work. Yeah, trying to think what else I can show you.
Myra, just because you were just mentioning there about the surface, I don't know, would it be possible for you to hold up one of the canvases so we can actually see what you were talking about there, the fact that there's, yeah, that one will do, lovely. Yeah, or even to hold it at an angle, so they just, yeah, because there's a few comments coming in just around and just
Yeah,
what you
there you
mentioned
go.
there.
You see?
So just how sheer the surface is.
Yeah. And it's not that there isn't a lot of paint on, it's just that it's either sanded down or else brushed away. And this is the sandpaper I use. It's 2000, so it doesn't even feel like sandpaper. So what you do is when you hold on a second. When you put this has one layer of paint on. When you put the gesso on, you can see it all around the edges, all rough. You dip this in water and you literally, you form it sort of an emulsion on it, and then you wipe it off with, I wipe it off with paper towels.
Yeah.
Just wipe it off, and so you're left with this smooth surface, and you can just, you can see how smooth it is.
So do you sand the gesso before
I paint?
Before you paint?
Yeah, and I would sand the gesso between layers.
Layers, yeah. And then do you sand then between the layers of paint as well?
I use the Laoghaire-Rathdown because of the finest I could find, right? Already fine when you get them. Hold on a second. Now, sorry about that. Here's one that has one layer of gesso on, but you can see how fine it is already. And it's like a Byron. So this is just one layer on, and it will go, that'll be sanded, and then there'll be another layer put on, another layer and another layer. And eventually what happens is all the gesso gets in between the grain, and so you're left with a smooth surface. And you might ask, why don't I just use board? It's because of that bounce. Anybody who paints knows that there's a lovely, to have some giveaway on the canvas. It's a lovely way to paint, where instead of a solid, rigid, surface. So.
Myra, there's a lot of questions coming in. Is it okay to go to some of the questions? Because it'll just kind of, while we have you there, because there's a few questions coming in around the, I'm going to, okay, I'm just going to get, Sinead Lawless had a question there. There are so many stages to your work and it is layered with meaning. What is it that drives you to paint the photographs as the final step and not leave them as photographs? I'm interested, as I also digitally manipulate images and paint them. There's something about putting it into paint that helps me to process them. So the question is, what is it that drives you to paint the photographs as the final step?
The photographs are a means to an end. That's all. I don't think I would ever. I'm not a photographer. I'm not trying to make a great photograph. I'm literally just trying to capture the image. I used to try and paint from the setup.
Yeah.
But you just move your head slightly and everything changes, because it's not even a mirrored surface. It's a bendy surface. So all the undulations change as you move, and you just drive yourself demented, to be honest with you. So that's the only reason I photograph them, is because I have to.
Okay. Thanks for that, Myra. That was my question. I'm just really fascinated by it because it's such a lovely process. I totally understand, and I get it now that even setting your easel up at that angle to try and take that from real life would be really difficult. But there's something beautifully kind of what's the word, kind of ethereal about the finished piece that probably maybe you'd have to be like, I don't know what kind of camera you'd need to capture. You probably use a little bit of imagination with the background maybe at the end to paint in whatever you to make manipulation.
I usually paint in what's there, because I think if you sort of look at things in a different light, if you're not trying to sort of manipulate things, and if you try, and I know I do manipulate things, but if you go with the flow to a certain extent, that's when sort of the the unusual, magical things come out. This is a work in progress. I'm just waiting for it to dry before I go again. So you can see, like, this shadow was there, and there are other shadows that will go in eventually. You don't have to put everything in. Well, I don't have to put everything in, but I think get as much in as you can. It just makes it more intriguing, I think, you know.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. And just on the technical question, does Myra varnish the paintings? And then just another question in relation to materials: do you always work in oils, or sometimes acrylics, or watercolors ever? That's the question there.
Like watercolors, I think are a completely different mindset, because you sort of work in reverse. You have to blank out your light bits first, or else it's completely if it's not done in the beginning, it's gone. So I think I have used watercolors, and I did start out with gouache. That was the very first thing I painted with. But oils are the magic for me, because they blend so well, you know.
Yes.
So they're the ultimate, and it took me forever to try and figure out how to paint them, how to paint with oils. And I'm not trained or anything. It's just hit and miss, I think, is the best way to go about it.
And just then somebody had asked if you varnish the paintings.
I do varnish the paintings, because you do need to varnish them, because you need to protect them. Otherwise, you know, they get scratched, or, you know, anything could happen to them. I do varnish them. I had a lot of big mistakes with varnish, and I've only just realized recently that you can actually take it off. Yeah. And that when you put one layer of varnish on, if you want to varnish it again, the second layer will actually move the first layer. So if you've made a mistake, it is possible to layer varnish.
And
so
is it reassuring. You use glazes, or you also use a final varnish?
I don't use glazes, no.
At all?
No, because they get too shiny, and then the surface, unless you glaze the entire thing, the surface changes and it gets very shiny. As you can see, that's just oil paint, but it's quite matte, because I don't use much oil in the medium. I just I basically use stand oil and Sansider. That's all. That's all I use.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if your paintings then became a reflective surface, that'd be a whole other thing then. You know, the paintings reflecting themselves.
I remember I did it once, and one of the first times I varnished, and you couldn't even see the painting because it was so shiny. So you know, you want people to be able to see into the painting. So I use a Sennelier. I use a matte and a semi-matte, and I mix them together, to be honest with you, to get one that's not really shiny but not too dull either. So it's I wish I could find one that was made exactly the way I want it, but I haven't found it yet.
And actually, just in relation to that, just come back to how long do you leave the oil paint before sanding?
The oil paint, it has to be dry. So
do you use a drying medium? No.
No.
You don't use a liquid? No.
No, there's no need. Because I don't put much oil into the paint, and I'll show you the paint I use. I use Old Holland, right? I find it's the best, and when you use a different paint, you have to get used to how that paint behaves. Yeah. So I know where I am now with Old Holland, so that's what I use, and they're beautiful, and there's not much oil in them, there's not much packing in them, so you're getting real color. So yeah. You know, they're expensive, but not that expensive, but in the long run, you know, it does save you money.
Yeah, and it is, as you said, that familiarity with how the materials work.
Yeah.
Even like when you were talking about brushes, and just even how the different colors work with each other. Just there's a question here about how from Heather would where would you recommend, or would you recommend, sorry, any courses to learn to paint?
I wouldn't, to be honest with you, because you're going to be being taught somebody else's habits and somebody else's preferences. And I know in the beginning it's a minefield and you don't know where you are, but YouTube is brilliant. You can learn anything you want on YouTube. You know, you really can. So the RHA do great painting courses. They really, really do. And you're learning from the very best. So if you wanted to do a painting course, I think maybe the RHA would be the only place I would recommend.
Thanks for that. Okay, so this, can we just go back up the way? It's a lot of compliments in, obviously. So I'm just going to go through these because there may be some questions.
Yeah.
Within those, and actually, if I could ask Maura or Camilla, somebody actually came in quite early, and I knew we were coming back to the end. The flesh Myra's paintings have a lovely surface. At the end, could Myra talk about how she prepares her surfaces? So I think you've covered that. Love the Pangea work. Wonderful insight into your work. Closely relate to, this is from Veronica Haywood, closely relate to your Pangea series with my arts group and with my arts group with the refugees. Really enjoying this. That's from Jacinta Monks. Love the depth of your work, Myra. It's very meaningful, and I think that's coming out across as well from many people saying the subtlety of the messages behind your work. Lovely insight into the work. This from Maggie Wright. It's beautiful and made even more so by the subtle messages behind it. There was a question about the course. Beautiful work on wonderful presentation. That's from Owen McLaughlin. Lovely presentation. Myra, thank you for sharing your process and the layered thinking behind your work. Absolutely fascinating. Lovely presentation, beautiful work. And then there was a question about working in oils as well. And then Caroline Ward had a question there about what is the reflective surface that you use when photographing?
I actually don't know what it's called. A really good friend of mine, Dee O'Shea, gave it to me in college, and I don't know where you get it, but there you go.
Huh.
It's a roll.
Yeah. So when that roll runs out, what are you going to do if you don't? You just pack up the painting brushes then.
I'm 10 years out of college, so.
Oh, that's good. That's very good value. However much that was the best value.
She gave it to me.
Oh, she gave even better. I don't know if anyone has. I'm just going to just scan the screens there. I don't know if anyone has a question.
There's one there, Claire, sorry, from Lee Hogan there, just near the end of chat. How long does it take from beginning idea to leaving the pieces finished?
I don't know, it depends. What is it? Somebody said nothing focuses you more than a deadline, so it depends on how fast I need the work. This piece went through, I'll actually show you on the slideshow again. This piece has gone through a few different metamorphoses. It's because there was no deadline, so I just kept working on it and sort of changing it. Normally, because every time I make a layer, I'll have to leave it dry for about 3 days before I go back to it. And then if everything goes right, because sometimes things just don't go right, I would say probably a couple of months, you know. But yeah. That's why there's always a good few different things going on, so that I work every day in the studio. Rarely, because it's just here, and especially at the moment, I'm just here every day. So I'll do a bit of this, a bit of that, you know. Go here.
So would you, like, you're very disciplined like that, so every day certain hours, like, or?
No, well, usually daylight hours. I don't like working at night. I don't know, the light is different, and I think sometimes I would work at night and I wouldn't have seen things properly, or, you know, it'll just look different. So I like being here during the day.
Yeah.
So.
And can I ask you a question just in relation to the, sorry, I had a whole series of questions, but I'm just going to ask one just while there is, in relation to the scale, and actually it was kind of why I asked you as you were going along, because I'm interested how you decide the scale of the work relative to what you're painting. Like, I'm interested in kind of the mixing of the scales between the object that you're painting and the scale of the work.
Well, I suppose I would have the idea in my head, and I would know where I was going with it, and what's, you know, what size would, you know, what size it would fit into. Like, for instance, the big piece on the back, it had to be that size, you know. It couldn't have been any smaller, and it was a pure joy to make it. You know, I love working big. I really do. I find I can get very tight when I'm working, you know, this size. It can get really tight and frustrating because every tiny little move, whereas when you're working big, you know, you can just stand back and see, and you can just run over and do what you need to do and stand back again, you know.
Yeah.
Where I'm usually sitting at the easel for making smaller works because I need to be right up on top of it.
And actually, just in relation to that, and kind of actually comes into where was asked, you know, how long does it take? Because one of the things you mentioned was and I don't know whether I'm quoting you correctly, but the idea, what you said was the idea is going in from second place to what it becomes.
Yeah.
Maybe expand a little bit on that, or.
I used to, you know, like, cause like, you know, fresh out of college is more or less ideas based. It's all about concept. It's all about backing up what what you're doing, and, you know, having a good reason for it. And it takes you a while to get out of that when you come out of college. You really, you know, you're sort of conditioned to, you know, justifying everything, you know. So after a while, I just noticed that there's some people, I'm sure you know this as well, Claire, any of the other artists, that when somebody is looking at your work, especially in a gallery or something like that, they're telling you what it's about. And it's usually nothing to do with what you put into it. So I think there is that other mirroring as well, that, you know, you put this in, but then what comes out is what they perceive it to be. So you really do have to let it go, and it does become its own thing. It is an entity in itself, you know.
Yeah, and I think that would even echo where you were saying about the using the gesso and the gesso going over the side, and here you said you were, you know, spending time actually, you know, sanding back. Whereas for me, looking at it, I'm kind of going, actually, it very much says what it is. It's acknowledgement of it. It's a painting.
Yeah.
It's a painting, and it's a three-dimensional, and the gesso, it nearly echoes the fabric on the, you know, on the painting itself.
Yeah. Plus it also has, it's like as if the whole illusion is just placed like another piece of fabric placed on top, you know.
Yeah. So I don't know, is there any question, if anyone has a question, if they want to put their hand up? Just a couple of minutes left. If there's no hands up, no.
There's a query there, Claire, just wondering, Myra, have you always painted?
Oh, very good.
No, I haven't, because I actually never even countenanced it. I used to draw a little bit myself, but I just never thought the option was there. I really didn't, you know, which is, it's a bit miraculous, really. You know, I just went to here in Bray, into Biffy, I went to what was it, art and ceramics course, and I just got bitten. I couldn't believe that, you know, I'd be allowed to do all these things. I really couldn't. So, because I was in my 40s, so, you know, it's just been amazing. No, I didn't paint before. You know, I didn't even have paints, you know. Yeah.
Did you want to go back to the presentation? I'm not sure whether we.
I have a few pieces of what I'm doing now, if you have time.
Yeah, we're about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
So if this.
I'll show you what I'm working on at the moment. Now, what do I do? Share screen?
Yeah, if you want to share screen.
Okay. Sorry. me find it. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so just a couple of artists I'm interested in. This is Sig Harvey, and she's a photographic artist. And
We're not seeing that chair.
oh, you're not seeing it. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Now, can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, this is Sig Harvey. She's a photographic artist. I love her use of color. I love the underlying tones of what she's talking about. And this is another artist. This is Chloe Early, an Irish artist living in London. And I just admire her work so much.
Actually, her work was exhibited in DLR Arts as part of the, and the women voted, part of the AIB art collection.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, I just think she's amazing. I'm just going to scroll down now. These are what I'm working on now. I had the great fortune to get a week in Tyrone Guthrie Centre last August in the middle of the pandemic. So these are images I made there, and as you can see, there was an awful lot of light bounce. Yeah. So I was using the flowers that are in. I'm doing a bit of a collaboration with Sorka O'Farrell, so the two of us are sort of working together, and we were there at the same time, so that was fortunate.
And Sorka O'Farrell's is here this morning, I think.
Yeah.
Yep, she is.
There somewhere. So we're sort of, the idea behind this is interference and our interference with nature. That's from my point of view anyway. So when I saw this would have been the image I took, and this is the image I took, and then what I did was I cleaned it up and took all the background out of it, and then I placed it onto a surface, and I think that's the way they're going to be painted. So it's actually a work in progress at the moment, so they're all sort of in half stages. So it's the idea, I liked the idea that when I cleaned the image up, I was left with all these bits, and they were like interference, so I decided to leave them there. So this is the way they're working at the moment. It could all change, but that's where it is at the moment anyway.
And when you mentioned it's a collaboration, what is the collaboration, or what form is it going to take?
Well, we're both working on our own work with a view to showing together. And I think it's the idea of nature getting on with things and us constantly feeling the need to interfere, and it's sort of, it's evolving as we go. We're not like, it's not set in stone yet as it is, but we're just sort of working away on it. Just I love some of the images, the way they've come out. So
we actually had Dr. Myra O'Connor on last week for she's a current director, well, recently appointed. Myra, I might just ask you just to stop share there, and we will. Sorry. Thanks, Megan. There's loads of thanks, Myra, for inviting us to your fabulous studio. I love your work; it's very inspirational. That's from Ashton McAtee. It's very inspirational. Your process is fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much, Myra and DLR Arts, for this wonderful talk. Just before we finish up, I actually just want to come back to give a little plug in relation to Pledge. So Myra mentioned one of the small pieces she's working on at the moment is for a collaborative project that I'm working on at the moment. There's the piece there. Yeah, do you want to hold it up again there, Myra, for a sec? So that piece is 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters, and I know that because we've asked Myra to participate in. Pledge is a project that I'm collaborating on with my sister. Pledge is the Irish for a blanket, and it's a national comfort blanket. So we've put a national call out, national and international call out, to any artists, crafters, creators, makers, doers, anyone who can submit work. The only restriction is that it's 15 centimeters square, and that the idea is that these artworks would then be assembled together. They won't be physically joined, they would be assembled together. You think of it like the granny squares of a crochet blanket, and these will be brought together sometime around the Midsummer's Day. The deadline is the 1st of May for artworks to be submitted. So if you on Facebook it's Pledge, and on Instagram it's Pledge Project 2021. So just getting in a plug there, and I did ask Myra if that was okay to do. So I think we might finish there. Just last two comments there. Sorry, last couple of comments there. Thank you so much, Myra, and sorry, a gorgeous hour. Thank you. That was from Lee Hogan. And then from Blonage, fabulous meander through Myra's wonder world and stunning work. So Gurmil Mahagut DLR. So I would heartily agree that it was fabulous. And as has happened with many of these talks, that it's just been a fantastic opportunity to see into the studio and thank Myra for the generosity of your time in putting together the presentation and thinking through the sequence and format of, and just the generosity of your even technical stuff around the discussing painting. I could be here for another hour, and I know many painters in the room could be as well. So I'd just like to say thanks very much. Thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. The next two studio visits we'll be doing are, I have them written, I do actually have them written down, is Michelle Boyle will be joining us from her studio in Cavan, in Virginia, in Cavan. That's on the 9th of April. And then Marie Hensey will be joining us from, on the 7th of May, she'll be joining us from her studio in Carlow. So we're going outside of the county. So I hope you'll all, they haven't been advertised yet, just before anyone starts getting panicked. And they will be going up on the DLR Arts e-bulletin in the next little while. But just keep an eye on the website, keep an eye on the Eventbrite for future events that are coming up. But thank you all for joining us. So we should have a nice weekend, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks a million.